Today the subject is the visual designers. And when I speak of visual designers, I'm speaking primarily of three, mostly usually individuals, but at least three sets of people. And that is the scenic designer, the costume designer, and the lighting designer. There is a fourth person here that at least I should mention, and that is someone who frequently and usually is referred to as the properties master. Properties in this instance is a word that indicates sort of two different things. One, if any of the furniture or other pieces that appear on the set as decorative pieces, those are called set props. Props is the word usually used shortened from properties. And then there is the other kind of prop, and that is one which might be handled by the actor, in which case it is called a hand prop. And a hand prop then is also something which the property master is responsible for. So therefore, in some cases, the property master may be working with the set designer in finding furniture and finding decorative pieces or whatever, and in some other cases, the property master may be working with the costume person, or maybe somewhat independent of either of those. If a character is to fire a gun during the course of the play, then obviously at this point the character has to have a gun, has to handle the gun, so therefore it is a hand prop. And it can't be, in most cases, just any gun. It has to be the correct gun, a gun which is appropriate to the time, the period, and all the other things that we're going to talk about here. And so in that case, the property master is the one who is responsible then for finding them. So basically, however, and obviously that person is going to be working with the other three individuals, and primarily the scenic designer and costume designer. So we're talking then about anything that appears and that gives you a visual dimension on the stage. From the moment the curtain goes up or the lights go up, whatever is the signal that the play has begun, from that moment on, visual signals are being sent to us out here in the audience. That is, everything we see, everything that one wears, everything that is on the set, the lights which are making all of this visible in some way or the other, every one of these, everything that we see there is the outcome of some artistic decision made by one of the designers. And what has guided them in making those decisions will be the script and finding that which is appropriate for this particular production. And then in that case, then these things have been chosen because in some way or the other, they are giving you a message, they are giving you a signal which is telling you something about the play, something about the characters. Now, this is true for theater, for film, and for television, because there are the visual designers who work on all of these, and they all work pretty much from the same principles. So at this point, I'm going to give you then 12 objectives and discuss each one of them. These are the objectives that usually either all three of the design areas, or certainly at least two of the design areas will have in some way or the other as a guide to themselves in helping them make decisions, help them make artistic decisions about what kind of signals, what kind of information do I want to give the audience. What do I want the audience to glean when they see these things? What do I want them to begin to know? What kind of impression is it that I want to convey for them? So let's go. Objectives. Objective 1, help set the historical period and geographic location. This is going to be true mainly of scenery and costumes. And that is, at this point, then we know that not all plays take place in our time, and so therefore people who are a play which is set in another period needs to dress people in such a way that they look like they belong to the particular period in which this particular play is set. We also know that not all plays are going to be set in our locale or even, say, in the United States. They can be set anywhere in the world or, as in some cases, out of this world. So in that case, then there'll have to be decisions made about what do these people wear? What does this environment look like in which that these characters inhabit? So therefore, scenery and costumes are going, from the moment we see them, are beginning to tell us something about the historical period in which this particular play is laid. And historical period, by the way, could even be, say, 1980s, because what people wore in the 1980s is not necessarily the same thing that they are wearing now in the 21st century. And if it's a set, maybe the colors which have been chosen are, and there are indeed 1980s colors, and those are not necessarily the same colors that are going to be in favor in the present day. So therefore, the first thing, help set historical period and geographic location. Second objective, help establish the place, interior or exterior. Seems fairly obvious, but still it is usually an objective that scenery and lights, although in some cases maybe even costumes, but certainly scenery and lights here will attempt to do, and that is that when you see the set, that when it is visibly lit, then at that point you know whether you are inside or outside. And lights can begin to tell you something there in terms of the way the lights come through the windows, or they come through the trees, or whatever it is here that we're trying to show that where we are in terms of being interior or exterior. Tied into that, and certainly fairly close, is help set the time of day, morning, afternoon, evening. In this particular case, lights primarily will do this, but again, in some cases, costumes may do this, and that is, we certainly know that in some cases what we're wearing in the morning may not necessarily be the same thing that we're going to be wearing in the evening if we're going out somewhere. So here, costumes would help make a distinction between the time of day. But lights here certainly very much begin to make a difference here, because morning light looks different from afternoon light, and obviously both any kind of daylight is going to look different from evening, night here. So that lights then, as whatever that source is that you have there, lights are going to begin to show you a distinction here as to where you are in the time of day. 4, help set the mood, tone, and style of production. This is true of all three, scenery, costume, and lights. And that is, as soon as that signal is the play has begun and you are now receiving those visual signals, visually these people begin to tell you, what kind of play is this? What kind of world are we living in? What is the style that this particular production is going to take? Is it light and fluffy, and is it going to be funny? Then in that case, the tone and the mood, which is going to be shown, the tone and mood, which will be shown to us by the colors, in this particular case, that have been chosen, are certainly going to be quite different from the colors that are going to be shown to us if the play is much more serious, if the play is one that is quite dark. So therefore, here, immediately color of the sets, color of the costumes, and even the color that come from the lights will begin in some way or the other to help us understand the mood, the tone, and the style of the production that we are going to see at this particular event. Number 5, indicate the nature of the individual character or group. Give some idea in terms of the status in society, rich or poor. Give some idea of perhaps the occupation of these particular characters. Give some idea here of personality. And this is one that perhaps we sometimes fail to grasp, and that is that when a character appears on stage, the character is dressed in a certain way because the designer or the designer in consultation with the director has made certain very specific decisions about who this character is, what kind of person this character is. And at this point then, in some way or the other, the designer will begin to convey this information to you, begin to give you some idea about who this particular person is. This is something that certainly in many ways carries over into everyday life. And maybe we don't often realize, but of course we choose our own personal clothing frequently by the kind of person we are, by the personality that we have. And so without our even realizing it, we then choose certain clothes to wear, certain colors to wear, certain styles to wear, because we want to convey, by our visual look, we want to convey to other people who we are. Well, we may not necessarily always be aware that we're even doing this in our everyday lives, but a costume designer is very much aware of this, and the costume designer will indeed make those choices based on what kind of information that the designer wishes to give the audience clues about the individual, about the personality, about who this individual is in some way or the other. Also, the set will begin to convey some idea about the status of the individuals, so that here we begin to get information about the world in which this particular play is going to take place. Number 6, show relationship among the characters. This is going to be true usually of scenery and costumes. It is going to be especially true frequently among costumes. And that is that in some way or the other, the costume designer will begin to show you that the characters are going to be aligned by using the same color range or the same color of some kind, so as to begin to tell you these particular characters belong together in some way or the other. Or the set, perhaps, will be painted in certain kinds of colors to indicate that certain characters belong in certain places on the set and other characters belong other places or whatever. So that what we have here then is through then especially color and perhaps line or in some cases maybe even texture, we will find then that characters begin to align themselves in some way or the other, and that these relationships are being shown to us so and to help us keep straight who they are and what their various relationships are. Number 7, create an environment for the characters. That is, remember, of course, this is the fictive world. Now, within this fictive world, these characters live. So, therefore, now we have to create an environment, and this is going to be done mainly by scenery and by lights, but create an environment which is going to be appropriate for these particular characters to live in. This may be something which is very close to reality, and that is we look at it and in almost the same way as we do a photograph, and we immediately recognize it in some way or the other, and so that tells us one thing. Or maybe it's something, maybe it's a piece of fantasy, or maybe it's a piece of science fiction in some way or the other. In this particular case, then, the environment may not look like anything that belongs in our reality, but whatever it is, the world that is being created here through the colors, the line, the mass, whatever, the world that is being created here is appropriate for those particular characters to inhabit. So, create an environment for the characters to live. Number 8, indicate the degree of realism. Now, I'm using the word realism here, I suppose, to mean sort of the degree of photographic reality. And that is, we look at something and let's go back, we look at a painting, and we look at a painting of, let's say it's called still fruit. And if at that point there are immediately recognizable apples, oranges, bananas, whatever, then that begins to be fairly close to perhaps the photographic realism. It's something that we immediately begin to recognize. But let's say in some way or the other that the artist has begun to move away from realism, they still, in that still life, in some way or the other, yeah, they look like oranges, and yes, they look like apples, but no, they aren't quite that same degree of photographic realism that we had in the other painting, but we began to recognize that, and maybe we can even move farther along on a continuum more toward abstraction here. Well, the same kind of thing can happen in the stage world, and that is, in creating that world, it can be a world which is fairly close to photographic realism, or it can begin to move away from that in some way or the other and move more and more toward an abstraction. So that we find then scenery, costume, and lights all here begin in some way or the other to help us understand the particular kind of fictive world that we're going to be watching in this particular production. Is it a fictive world which is going to be fairly close to reality, in which we can expect the characters to do fairly believable kind of actions, or is it going to be something which is going to move away from that in some way or the other? Or is the language, the dialogue that is going to be heard during the evening, is it going to be dialogue which sounds fairly familiar to us? Does it sound like everyday, ordinary conversation that might go on between characters? Or is that language going to be used in some way or the other? Is it going to be much more of a lyrical dialogue or language? Is it going to be much more of a poetical dialogue or whatever? Is it going to be stripped down dialogue, and that is very economical, so that it is not, so that words are not wasted in any way or the other? In the contemporary theater, we frequently find that there are playwrights that use language in a very economical style. The playwrights Harold Pinter and David Mamet both work in that way. then if that is what the language is, then we also need, then the visual designers also need to begin thinking in terms of then that therefore the way they design the set, the costumes, especially, that is going to be somewhat more restricted than it would be if the language were rather ordinary, and so therefore the set and costumes should also reflect that in some way of the world. Realism, or maybe I should say the height of realism today, of course, is in the realm of film and television. In the realm of film, if the movie wants to take place in the Grand Canyon, then it's usually fairly easy. They go, simply pick up the crew, pick up everyone, take them to the Grand Canyon, and they film it in the Grand Canyon, so that we know that we are in this realistic environment of the Grand Canyon, and therefore the film itself is very much a realistic film in terms of the action of the characters, in the terms of the language that they speak here. And the same thing, of course, is true of television. Television, this is one of the reasons why television works so much in interior, and that is because interior scenes, especially for television, are fairly easy to create in a quite photographic, realistic kind of way. And so therefore, immediately then, as the scene begins and we're in the house of a certain character, that house looks real. The furniture looks real. The furniture looks like it belongs to that particular group of people. The clothes that those characters are wearing look like they belong to that character. We recognize all of this in a sense of reality. But we also can recognize that there are ways in which we can move away from reality in some way or the other. However, in film and television, even in, say, science fiction and fantasy films, we still find there that the look that is attempted to be achieved is very much one of reality. While it may not be our reality, it still looks real for that particular set of characters, that is, in terms of what they wear, in terms of their makeup, in terms of what the scenery is in the set in which those characters inhabit. So therefore, in some way or the other, the visual designers are to indicate to us the degree of realism here which is attempting to be achieved in this particular production. 9, provide visibility. Now, in this particular case, visibility is going to be, and first and foremost, of course, this belongs to lights. And this, in fact, becomes the first thing that any lighting designer has to decide. Before the lighting designer begins to think in terms of mood, and the lighting designer is very much aware of mood, because the lighting designer, depending on how bright the lights are, or how dim the lights are, or what color the lights begin to reflect, all of that tells us something about mood, about the tone of the piece, and the lighting designer is very much a part of that. But first and foremost, the lighting designer has to light the scene so that we can see, most of all, the characters there. This, of course, is true in all three, theater, film, and television. And this is one of the reasons why that a great deal of time is expended before the production begins, if it's in the theater, or scene by scene, if it is in film and in television. A great deal of time is expended on getting the lights right, on getting the lights set in such a way that we can see the particular characters. Even here, now, this moment, these particular lights were set in such a way so as to enhance your visibility of being able to see me, because we know that In being able to see me, then you are able to hear me better. It is very true, especially in the theater, and that is, if you can't see the character, you usually can't hear the character. Now, that sounds very strange. And there are some cases, of course, where you want a voice to come out of darkness. But in most cases, then, in the theater, you want the audience to be able to see the character. By seeing the character, they can hear the character. The two go very much hand in hand. Costumes can also, however, very much be a part of visibility, and that is that frequently in some way you will discover, if you look closely, that the set designer, or I'm sorry, that the costume designer has in some way perhaps enhanced somewhere up here around the neck, or maybe somewhere up at the top of the costume is going to be a color which may be lighter than maybe the rest. Now, the reason that color is going to be light, or maybe there's going to be a white collar here, or whatever, one of the reasons is so as to enhance the face. One, that is, by a lighter color being here, then that is going to draw your attention up here, and immediately is going to draw your attention to the face itself. Also, by this color being lighter, then the light is going to pick this particular color up a little more. It's going to reflect just a little more light up here on the face than it would be otherwise. So without your even necessarily always being conscious of it, costumes also can work and help us achieve visibility. Number 10, provide focus. This is true of scenery, costumes, and lights. All of these, in some way or the other, work together to help us know where to focus. Now, this is especially true in the theater, but also in film and television. But in film and television, there is another helper in terms of achieving focus, and of course, that is the camera itself. And that is, in film and television, the camera focuses on where the audience is supposed to look, and frequently then, of course, or usually, the camera will simply block out what else may be around, and so that all one can see as one looks on the screen or looks at the screen, all one can see there is what the camera is showing. But of course, also at that same time, then the lights must be focused in such a way so as to help enhance our seeing that which the camera is focusing on. So their lights are also still working. However, in the theater, in which we are sitting in our seats, and we always have the broad view or the wide view, because we can always see the totality of the picture. We can always see all the stage. So in that case, then, the director works with the scenery, costumes, and lights in such a way as the director wants you to look at certain character or certain groups of characters, then at that point, the director is going to put those characters in such a location or in such a way that your gaze is drawn to that particular location. Lights lights can also very much help here, and that is the lights can dim maybe slightly or maybe even more than slightly around the rest of the stage, and then the lights are going to be brighter in this particular location. So in that particular time, then, without our even knowing it, our eyes are brought to there, our attention is brought to that location, and we have now focused on it in some way or the other. Or characters, characters that are leading characters usually are going to wear colors, so far as costumes are concerned, They are going to be wearing costumes which perhaps are predominant in, or dominant in color or saturated in color, so that immediately we gaze at them and we look at them, whereas the characters who are of lesser importance will be wearing colors that are not so dominant or not so important in some way or the other, so that immediately we know, as we see that character, we already understand from the color that particular character is wearing, this is a dominant character, this is a leading character in some way or the other. Scenery can help provide focus, especially in terms of elevation, of steps, or whatever, because immediately, usually if a character is higher than other characters, then immediately that character is going to achieve focus in some way. This particular, so that a set designer will provide areas in which then, when we arrive at a moment and a director wants us to focus on these characters at this moment, in this location, for this particular action, then perhaps in some way or the other, the director will manage to get them to a slightly higher location than some other places on stage, or other characters who may be standing around, so that immediately by the height, or in some cases a difference, a character who in somehow or the other is in a different kind of arrangement or a different kind of posture is going to achieve focus there. So therefore, let's say that there are 6 characters standing around on stage and 1 character sitting. Now, we would usually think then, yes, the characters standing are higher. So therefore, those characters, because of their height, they're going to achieve more focus. But in this case, there's 1 character different from the rest. So immediately, that character sitting in that chair is going to have attention drawn to where that character is sitting. So by the chair being provided by the set designer, by the director, then using that particular chair at this particular moment, that is going to give us a focus that we might not otherwise have. So there are all kinds of ways here in which the director, working with the visual designers, can manipulate the audience, can guide the audience in such a way so as to say, focus here, look here, this is where you are, this is what I want you to see and to hear at this particular moment. Number 11, provide a central image or metaphor. This isn't always apparent, and it not necessarily is always present, but it is certainly possible that sometimes there can be a certain central image that the director wants to convey in some way or the other, or a metaphor that has been chosen for the particular production. And so therefore, in working with the set designer, the costume designer, and the lighting designer, the director will begin to, these designers will begin to find some way that they can give a visual enhancement or a very definite visual signal of what this central image or metaphor may be. And then 12 and last, and that is all of these designers work with each other, they coordinate with each other and attempt to be consistent, that all of the design elements come together in some way to create an artistic whole. Now, most productions that we see usually work along the lines of consistency, of coordination. It is possible, and there are certain kinds of theater where it is intended that these elements are going to be dysfunctional with each other. but in this case, this is a very deliberate attempt or a very deliberate intention made by the designers and the director, and so in this case, you will certainly be aware of this in some way or the other. But most film, television, and theater usually work with the idea that all of the elements are going, all of the visual elements that we have here are in some way or the other going to be consistent with each other and are going to have some kind of overall coordination here. Now, scenery and costumes are usually three-dimensional, although there may indeed be frequently two-dimensional elements present. Frequently, scenery is indeed painted scenery, and even to the extent of that the scenery is going to use painting techniques, and that is a two-dimensional effect. But frequently, scenery will also use a three-dimensional effect in some way or the other. Or in some cases, scenery may use a two-dimensional effect painted to such a degree of realism that from the audience standpoint, you can't tell that that is only a two-dimensional effect that is in front of you instead of a three-dimensional effect in some way or the other. But scenery and costumes, and of course costumes are nearly always, or are certainly always three-dimensional, although again they may use painting techniques of some kind, of a two-dimensional nature of some kind or another. But scenery and costumes are usually three-dimensional. Lights then reinforce that dimensionality, or even perhaps in some cases help fool us in such a way that we are not aware that a two-dimensional painted effort is in front of us, and instead lights reinforce it in such a way that it takes on and looks three-dimensional to us. Light also creates its own particular dimension, and lights in one way do this by strong shafts of light that will come in, and at that point then those shafts of light create a three-dimensional effect. Even though we can see through those shafts of light begin to take on their own dimensionality. Scenery and costumes, and I've mentioned this all the way through what I've been talking about here. Scenery and costumes therefore use color, line, mass, texture, and form. And all of these particular artistic elements are chosen in such a way, and again, usually are deliberately, artistically chosen so as to convey certain information, to send certain signals to the audience in some way or the other. I've mentioned already, certainly many times, and color is perhaps one of the easiest to understand, and that is that a leading character is usually going to be in some kind of dominant color or a saturated color, so that immediately we understand this is a leading character of some kind or the other. And then if characters are of lesser importance, then they are going to perhaps be in colors that are not going to be so dominant or so outstanding here in some way or the other. But also, and we talk a great deal about line. The costume designer will talk about period line, and by that meaning, or the period silhouette. And that is that the costume, when one looks at it, when one looks at what one wears in an Elizabethan costume, the lines and the mass of that particular costume are going to be quite different from the lines and the mass that we wear in our own time in some way or the other. Also texture here, very much. Set designers use texture in some way or the other. If the particular play is, let's say, that it is an abrasive play in some way or the other, then maybe in that way the set designer will give us a set which begins to have in some way or the other a rougher texture rather than a smooth texture. Maybe you're not even aware of this as you look at it, but again, that's one of those signals that's being sent to you, and perhaps you subconsciously receive it, but it's one of those signals that is being sent to you in one way or the other. I remember a friend of mine at one time talking about having worked with a very famous costume designer, and in this particular play, the costume designer took many of the fabrics that the characters were wearing and took a grater, and yes, a kitchen grater to them, and grated the fabric so as to rough it up in some way or the other. Didn't want this fabric to be smooth, did not want this fabric to convey that kind of texture to the audience, but instead chose fabrics then that were much thicker, fabrics that were much rougher, and that is, just think in terms here for yourself of the difference between a piece of silk fabric and a piece of burlap fabric. Immediately think of the difference here in texture of those particular pieces of fabric, and you can begin to see then how a costume designer may well choose then that this particular character wears burlap because this is the personality I want to convey, or this is the a status kind of thing that I wish to convey in some way or the other, versus another character who may be wearing silk, which flows quite differently from the flow of burlap. So that again, the line that a silk dress may make or a silk piece of fabric may make as it moves on stage, as a character moves on stage, the line that is being made by that, the flow that is being made by that silk fabric is going to be quite different from the line and the flow that is being made by a character who is wearing a burlap kind of way, a burlap kind of fabric. The same thing can be true always on the set. And again here, the attempt to create dimensionality here, and that is to create then a degree of reality. The greater the three-dimensionality of the set is, then to a large extent, the greater the degree of reality is for us and for us to accept here. So scenery and costumes use very much color, line, mass, texture, and form so as to convey and to send to us signals, pieces of information for us in the audience to understand. And then the lights are used in some way to reveal and to make visible to us those color, line, mass, texture, form, and reveal shapes and forms in some way or the other to us. So remember then that there are 12 objectives that the visual designers are going to attempt in some way or the other to fulfill, that they are going to use color, line, mass, texture, and form to convey and help us and help them fulfill those objectives and to send the message to us in the audience so that we can understand this. And I suppose at this point the question that always arises, am I supposed to remember all of this? Well, the answer, I think, lies in that the more you understand about this and the more attuned you are to this, then immediately the more you will begin to understand what it is that you are watching. And this is going, again, I come back to, this is going to be true whether it be in the theater, whether it be in film, whether it be in television. And yes, even that 30-minute sitcom that you may watch every week Everything that you have seen visually that goes on, or that you see within that sitcom, all of that has been chosen within these objectives, with these objectives in mind. And yes, the color, the line, the mass, the texture, and the forms that you are looking at up there on that screen on your television set, all of those have been chosen in some way or the other to give you, without your necessarily knowing it, if you don't know this at all, you still subconsciously begin to be aware of it in some way or the other. It's all there. It's all a part of our understanding this in some way. But if we do know these things, if we do understand these things, then we can begin to perhaps know more, understand more about what is going on, and begin to realize what is happening even in that 30-minute sitcom that we watch week after week. What I'm going to do now is I have a whole series of slides, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you these series of slides, and I'm going to talk about them. Talk about them in such a way as, just as you look at those slides, that you can begin to see some of these very objectives that we have been talking about, how they are present in this particular in these particular slides you're looking at, how they were true in this particular production. And you may even certainly begin to find many things as you look at them that I haven't even talked about here. But I'm just hitting on some particular points that I want to make so that in some way or the other that perhaps you can have a little more understanding of these objectives, these elements, these artistic elements that are being used. In most cases, what we're going to do is we're going to sort of show you the slides twice. And that is, what we'll do is we'll go through them. In most cases, there are only like 4 or 5 at a time. We'll sort of go through them fast, show you the whole 4 or 5 or whatever it is here, then come back and show them to you more slowly so that as I continue talking about them, you can begin looking at them in some way or the other. Okay, first, 4 slides from No Nanette. This is a musical. This is a musical set in the 1920s. In fact, it is a 1920s musical written in the 1920s, and when it is produced today, it is still dressed in that particular period. So that, of course, one of the first things we begin to, as soon as you begin looking at them, one of the first things you certainly begin to see is you're going to see, you know this is not the present day. You can begin to see that from the costumes. You can certainly also begin simply looking at the room that you see here. You know that does not necessarily look like a room in a house in the present day. So immediately we have begun to convey to you the historical period in which this particular place, play takes place. While the geography is not particularly important here, it is, in this case, it is in New York City, and it may well be that as we look at it, we may get at least some idea of that, again, this is not Midwest. It certainly begins to suggest it is something different here. We also can immediately see its interior. We also can begin to see it's certainly day. It is not night. We can begin to see from the colors, we can begin to see from the intricacy of the design that the colors are light, that this is a musical which is going to be great fun, and so therefore we begin to get some idea about the mood and the tone and the style that we're going to get here. We also can begin to see from the costumes and from the set that this is not a poor, downtrodden location. This is very obviously the home of someone who has a great deal of money. So therefore, while we don't know the occupation, we certainly can tell the status that they are rich and that they must move in a fairly high degree of society. Also, we can begin to tell as we look at the colors here, the environment begins to tell us something, who these people are, begins to give us some idea of the kind of people they are. And again, while there may be certainly problems that are going to occur during here, nothing here is going to be earth-shattering. Everything about the environment tells us that this is fun, that this is going to be lighthearted, this is going to be a romp in some way or the other. We look at it and it's fairly realistic, but we also begin to realize that there is perhaps an overabundance of detail here. There is perhaps a great deal of busyness about the design, just as there is going to be then a great deal of busyness about this particular play, about the actions of the particular characters here in some way or the other. So that this realism then is not one which we think of as utter reality, but begins to be something which shows us that a different kind of realism here. Again, lights and everything else is going to show us visibility in some way or the other. And then look at the totality of the picture that you have seen here, and you can certainly begin to see how then all three of these elements, scenery, lights, and costume, have been coordinated and are consistent with each other and give us an overall totality. Next, this is a play. This is from the production of Julius Caesar. First, we're going to look at 6 slides, and these 6 slides are going almost immediately. The first thing you're going to see here is the head, the face, the great huge face that dominates this. This is actually a 2-sided face, and it was very deliberately chosen because this was indeed an attempt to give you a central image or metaphor for the production, for the set or the scenic elements here to give you this metaphor. When we first see the face is rather smooth. The face looks like it certainly is like a statue here, but after, and if you remember the play Julius Caesar or know Julius Caesar, know that he was assassinated by a group of conspirators, and so after the assassination, then this great huge face that you see there flips, and you can see there's a slide there that shows you this head turning around, and then on the other side of the face is revealed, and the face is now quite degenerative. The face is very marked, and using thus lines in this particular case, then the smoothness of the face on the other side, which begins to indicate to us one tone and one kind of mood. This face, which we see the second time, this now certainly begins to convey to us that there is a great deal of unrest here in some way or the other. So that this metaphor, the set has very much conveyed to us the metaphor. The costumes are Roman, and so immediately we are told about the time and place that we are in. Next 2 slides are also from Julius Caesar, but in this particular case, they are there because I very much want you to look at the use of light. This is Mark Antony's funeral oration, and that is, it is the Friends, Romans, Countrymen oration, which you may at least remember slightly. And here, look at everything here has been so as to achieve, to give Mark Antony a focus. the shaft of light, the very strong shaft of light that comes down upon him. Also the color, he is wearing white, so that immediately, again, there is a visibility here in some way or the other. Also notice that he is standing higher, so that there is an elevation here. There is also a great shaft that goes up behind or beside Mark Antony, so that all of this is used to convey strength, to convey in some way the power that Mark Antony is going to have from this point then through the rest of the play, as Mark Antony now dominates the play following the assassination of Caesar. So that these very definite visual signals were being given. The next slides you're going to see are two slides from Taming of the Shrew. If you remember Taming of the Shrew, or even if you don't, the first slide shows you, you look at it and yeah, you can say, it's a wedding dress. Yes, it is indeed a wedding dress. And this particular wedding dress, however, if you begin to look closely at it, you will begin to see that it is made up, and while you really can't tell that perhaps from the picture, but it is made up of many loops of felt. And those loops, there are many, many loops of felt that go all around that particular dress. And on the underside of those loops of felt were lined in color. And so this is a very particular wedding dress. Kate is very distraught at this point. Kate does not want to get married, and as you can see in the other slide, what her bridegroom looks like, you can begin to understand why Kate is very distraught. This was a marvelous, wonderful dress, because as Kate moved across stage, then in this case, line and color, all of those loops jiggled. And as they jiggled, they revealed the color that was on the underside of that. And all of this very, very much begins to convey to us the distraughtness that Kate has here, how upset she is over this particular marriage. The next four slides are from Romeo and Juliet. And in this particular case, this is where color was used to show us two warring families. If you remember Romeo and Juliet, Juliet's family is in warfare, or is in dispute, better word, is in dispute with Romeo's family. And of course, the two of them fall in love with each other. But in order for the audience to keep straight in some way or the other who these two families were and which people belonged on which side, then in that case, one family, and in this case, Juliet's family, dressed in reds, pinks, and oranges. Romeo's family dressed in blue and greens. So that immediately when you looked as characters came on, and those particular characters were in one of those ranges of color, then you could tell which side they belonged. And if they were colors that did not belong to either one of those, then it indicated those characters were neutral in some way or the other. So with these particular sets of slides, we have certainly begun to give you some idea then of how these objectives of the visual designers could be met, and how they used color, line, mass, texture, and form to convey this to you.